Fortunately, in the Mabo case, one of the accepted norms now in common law is that in Australia, Aboriginal, as with Canada, Aboriginal title survived British sovereignty. All the high courts in Canada, the High Court in Australia has said that as well. So that's an accepted now legal norm. The other thing that was said in Mabo, if we look at that in terms of the sovereign state itself, they also say that Aboriginal title under law and custom, existing law and custom of Aboriginal people, past to this present day, and I hope and it will be into the future, but where our law and custom have survived, and they recognise that it has, and that it has survived British sovereignty. The Mabo judgment also said that Aboriginal title burdens Crown title. Now, if it burdens Crown title, well, then our law applies to that country. Our law, is the law of the land. And so it's that law of the land that we are asserting a right now to govern. And so we now combine the modern and the old in terms of the ways in which we govern the Euahlayi state. We went through a workshop with the Executive Council of State yesterday, all day. Once people began to realise what was happening here, and that the next step now is govern. The next step is not about talking about it anymore. The next step is how do we make this happen? And so the ministers realised yesterday, those persons who took on those portfolios realised that, okay, we're starting from the ground up here. We're starting from a bare ground, a clean slate, yeah? And it's great that Angela sort of made it very clear that, when we were looking at it, we kept looking at it and we said, okay, you're the accountant, you're of the Euahlayi state, you're of our ancestry, you've got these qualifications, you're the one that's going to have to get the money. You're going to help us look for the money. We're going to make this thing. We're going to build this state from the ground, from a clean state. How do we do that? So now we have to workshop that. And we did a lot of workshopping yesterday with the Executive Council of State. And in workshopping, what we did was to identify the difficulties that are before us. We looked at the realities, so we looked at the possibilities, the probabilities, and the impossibilities. And then we look at not going to happen. That sort of stuff. And so the not going to happen is merely the long-term thing that can't happen in the short term or medium term. So now it's just this whole process of developing a state from the ground up, and that's our greatest challenge. We all accept that there's a challenge here. Of course, we understand that the Australian state is uncertain about its own existence, and that sure, it's running along, and a lot of Australians and non-Aboriginal Australians are not really happy with the way in which the country is being governed at present. And unfortunately, we've been subjected to that all our lives. So the white folk are only just starting to realise how bad their politicians are, and unfortunately, they can only vote for the ones who have been nominated. So, and that's restricted by the capacity of people to be able to have the money to promote themselves and be able to do it. So, really, you're voting the people who've got money and who's capable of generating money. So, the democratic state in Australia is confined to those who can raise the most amount of money, get the most publicity, in terms of paying for media advertisements and all that. So if you haven't got that money, you've got no chance of being a politician in Australia. And I think that's quite unfair, because the people then vote for those persons who unfortunately do have vested interest, and whereas we, on the other hand, we all got nothing, and so we're not in there to sort of to advance the causes of someone who's paid us to paid for our campaign, for example. That's the difference between what we're doing and what happens with the Australian government. And of course, big businesses are ruling the roost. In our country, the beauty about Aboriginal people is that we think about country first, then we think about, okay, where are we going to get a feed from, but it works quite well. Okay, when you have no limitations on population growth and expansion, and you're unable to contain the testosterone of the population, and they breed like rabbits, then you have to, unfortunately, you develop corrupt societies. It's open for corrupt activities, and then you have the haves and have-nots, and we're not in that position. at this point in time. So I guess we're lucky because we have a state with very little within it. Mind you, we have 7 towns within our states, but there are small populations, and they're populations that we know that we can cater for and that we can work with. We have a lot of farmers, and farmers have a lot of land, but there's only about 10, 12 people on those farms, if that. There's probably about 6 to 8 people living, or maybe even 3 to 4. Living on farms and running farms. So your population is not that great.